Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're really excited to have you join us for this series, and it's about the power of enablement, which I know is a topic that's really important to all of us on the panel as well as the audience. My name is Nakhi. I'll be the series lead, and as we're introducing ourselves, we'd actually love you from the audience to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name, where you're from, your role, as well as maybe even the scope of the responsibilities that you actually have on your team. I currently work as the Global Enablement Director with MariaDB, initially focused on revenue enablement, and more recently, we're focusing on bringing in the customer training and enablement organization under my team. And there's a lot of exciting work that we're doing there. Now, before I pass it to my fellow panelists to introduce themselves, I wanted to actually share a quick fun fact. So I did a bit of research, and among the four of us, we actually have about 40 years of experience, which is like amazing, right? A ton of experience. And I know we all know this and feel this. Every year kind of feels like dog years, right? Because we do so much different work and take on so much responsibility. So really, that's more like 300 years, which is incredible. And yet we all know that while training has been around for years, enablement is a fairly new discipline. And this is why conversations and events like these are so valuable, is being able to share best practices and what we've learned with you all, and actually learn from you what's been working as well. So with that, I'm going to actually pass it over to Sheevaun to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sheevaun Thatcher. I am the VP of Digital Learning and Enablement at RingCentral. My purview includes teams that support customer training, as well as sales enablement, as well as employee L&D as well. So we cover the whole training gamut and the whole enablement gamut, partners, GSP, channel, you name it, for RingCentral. So we've got quite a significant team. There's about 160 of us after starting from a team of 2 in February 2017.
That's incredible. Great growth. Paul, what about you?
Hi, I'm Paul Butterfield. I'm the VP of Revenue Operations for a company called Instructure. A lot of people know us best by our flagship product, Canvas, because it's so widely used in public schools and higher education as an education LMS. My team is responsible, as you might guess from my title, for enabling all of the revenue teams at Instructure. I report to the CRO. And so we also are responsible for the professional development of the marketing teams, RevOps teams, in addition to the actual quota carriers. And recently, we've been in very active acquisition mode. We did 3 last year. We've already done 1 this year. And so we're now branching out and building a company-wide onboarding, taking what we built for the revenue org and now doing it so that we've got a system in place for all acquired employees going forward. And so that's what I'm excited about right now.
That's fantastic. And Michelle, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Michelle Dotson, and I am the head of go-to-market enablement and strategy at Zoom. So we are responsible for the enablement of anybody within our revenue organization. So there's about 8 different teams that we help: our sellers, SCs, CS. Anyone who is customer facing or has a hand in the customer journey is who the team supports. So really excited to be here on the panel with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So our audience, continue to introduce yourselves. It's great to see all the names rolling in and where everyone is from, even from Spain. So our focus today is really on building enablement as a strategic function, which is really critical for us to unleash the full power of enablement. And that's a topic of focus for today. So Michelle, I was going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your perspective on the purpose of enablement? You know, we hear a lot of conversation around defining enablement. What does it mean? And there are different perspectives. And sometimes we get caught up on the semantics of that. For this conversation, I think identifying the purpose of enablement can be really valuable. So tell us your perspective.
So I think if you asked us this question even just 3 years ago, we probably would have had a completely different answer. I think enablement as a practice, it really depends on where you are in your company's journey and what they need. With that being said, I feel like we wear a lot of hats. It's not just training. Gone are the days of, hey, do this like me and I'll teach you on a golf course. We are now all about change management, communication, crisis management, learning, development, anything that has to do with how you can make a large number of people successful sometimes just falls in our responsibilities. I think enablement as a function as well is not just take this training and tell me that you took the training. It's really about knowledge, adoption, retention of even employees. Learning has become almost like a perk. And so enablement needs to be engaging and fun and creative, because the more people learn, the more they want to stay, the more successful they are. So I think it's like no longer just training, which is sometimes what people put like a 1-to-1 ratio of enablement and training. But it's so much more than that. And I just joke a lot of the times that I don't know that I really spend a lot of time doing enablement. I think we spend a lot of time with the strategy and the building and the trying to just figure out what our teams need.
And that is a very good perspective to have, and actually something I'm sure we all agree with. I think sometimes the challenge, though, is that people use enablement just freehand, and it usually symbolizes to them some sort of training. So redefining what it means within an organization, especially one that hasn't had an enablement function before, I think is really critical. Paul, Sheevaun, you're nodding your heads. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, from the perspective of enablement, I think where we get ourselves trapped a lot of times as enablement leaders is talking about enablement as the function of enablement, as opposed to enablement being a function of the support system and the customer journey system. And so when we talk about enablement, we talk about it a lot as a business, right? So there are investors, there is supply chain, and there are customers. And our customers are not the sellers, for example. Our customers are the sales managers. And from a strategic point of view, that relationship between the segment leaders and the sales enablement people is absolutely critical when it comes to making the programs work. Because, Michelle, I know you can back this, and Paul, you can do the same, is that you can have the best programs in the world. You can have the best enablement people in the world, which I'm sure we all agree we do. All it takes is one sales manager that has a following to go, I don't want to do it. And it becomes a house of cards. So from a strategic point of view, that is the one relationship that is more important than even the investor relationship or the supply chain relationship, is that customer stakeholder relationship. So strategically, that's critical. And when you get that type of relationship, you no longer have conversations about training. You have conversations about strategy, about go-to-market, about ensuring that the content that is being received is consumable by sales. You build a full tribal knowledge system, right? All of these things that go around a fully functioning environment from a strategic point of view are built on that relationship, because we're responsible for, to the organization to make sure that they get everything that they need from an enablement and a support perspective. But it's those sales managers themselves, first line and up, that are actually responsible for the execution of the programs to include and to ensure that the sales come through.
Yeah,
I could not agree with you.
I was going to say,
Go ahead, Paul.
I love what you said at the beginning about changing the perception of being trainers to something different. When I pivoted from sales leadership into enablement, which I guess is my 10th year now doing enablement, I was influenced very early by some folks, Roderick Jefferson being one of them. And I'll never forget the thing I read from him. The thing that he said that just really hit me was, you train animals, you enable human beings. And I've always loved that. And I try to not even use the word training, or I use it very selectively, even when communicating within my team and certainly within our organization. The piece that I would add to what Michelle and Sheevaun said is, when I look at what enablement does, and again, this is part of working in a strategic relationship, is we are helping any customer-facing team along that customer journey path, enabling them to offer that exceptional experience. We live in an experience economy. We all demand it from the companies we do business with, and our customers expect no less from us. And we may have great products, but if we don't earn the right to have that conversation and be seen as more than just a vendor, then our customers really don't differentiate very well between us and our competitors in most cases. So that's the one thing I would add is that we're enabling those customer-facing teams to really offer an exceptional experience and then win through doing that.
Yeah, and having the conversations in their vernacular, right? If we're talking about adult learning techniques and some of the, the nomenclature that we work with adult learning, it doesn't matter to most of our stakeholders. They don't care, right? So my primary stakeholder, who's their CRO, cares about two things. He cares is productivity going up and attrition going down. So any conversation I have with him, with any of the KPIs and data that we get, all has to be bubbled up to that. Is productivity going up? Is attrition going down? And so that's, those are the conversations I have. Now, as you go down the hierarchy, those conversations get more in depth and they cover more things. And typically when you get to the first line manager, you start having conversations about, did they do the, was the training? And Paul, like what you said, we're trying to avoid using training. We're starting to use facilitation instead, because that's really what we do. Yeah. We facilitate the knowledge. And so when you get down lower in the hierarchy, that's where those facilitation discussions start happening, right? Is it working? Are they getting what they need? Are the right people getting it? All of that.
Yeah, and I think we're talking a lot about change management, which is actually the focus of our second session. And it's really, really important. And Sheevaun, I totally agree with you in terms of the responsibility of managers, especially frontline leaders in any initiative. There's never going to be the same ratio we have in enablement as a frontline leader has with their team. So they're always going to have more time, more resources in that way to support the end user or customer that we serve, right, internally. As well as our customers externally, in addition to that. So one of the things that really stands out to me too, in terms of what I've learned and experienced, is us being able to remove barriers, problem solve, act as a bridge across the organization. There's a lot more that we can do with some of those components. And I'm curious if you guys have experienced that, and if you want to share something that would be valuable to the audience.
We did a process back in January. I actually put a proposal together. It took 3 years to get it approved. But with that proposal, it was to literally break the barriers that you're talking about, because most companies have training for solution engineers, training for professional services, training for sales, training for engineering, training for, right? And what you end up with is, number one, a whole slew of different training tools, which doesn't solve anybody's issues. But you also have the more difficult process of all of this duplication, and is what's being trained consistent across the whole organization. And so by bringing all those teams together, we were able to look at the various types of facilitation and training. We do some very technical training, and look at it all across the whole organization and say, where is the common thread? Where is the commonality? And where can we talk about the levels and the depths? And so we say, rather than solution engineering, professional services, whatever, we say, take that and make it much more layered. 101, 201, 301, 401, much more like a university would do. And so, 101 is, I can spell Ring Central. Right. And if somebody taps me on the shoulder, I can say, no, we're not the doorbell company. Number two, and when you get to the 201 level, it's more, I'm a seller, I'm customer facing. I can talk about who we are, why we exist, who our customers are, some use cases maybe, and really those sales types of conversations. 301 is when you have to be able to do a demo or do an architecture diagram or do those kinds of things. And 401 are, I lovingly call them because I was one, a bit bashing propeller head, right? Those are the ones that are down there doing all the integrations and all that other good stuff, the coders and, drink lots of Coke and mismatch socks. And it's by doing that, we can say, regardless of your role in the company, you can be a financial analyst and still need 101, right? Or you can be, the competitive analyst and you can go to 201 and maybe 301. And so we plug people into this matrix depending on who they are and what they need, as opposed to where they exist in the organization. And that's made a big change in the way we deliver.
Yeah, the best example I can share, at least current Dell, is what I referenced in my introduction. And that is that, so I agree with Sheevaun. We all have incredible teams, and my team is definitely in there. And over the last couple of years, have built what we call Panda University, and all that. You see, you've got the onboarding, you've got the unique ramping pathways, and all of those things. And now it's always improving, but it's pretty mature, and we have the opportunity to now take that out to the rest of the company. There is not a consistent program like that in the rest of the company, and it's not a dig on anybody else. It's just not there. And so we're able to now start pulling departments together. And so what we've done is created, as I say, we're starting off with acquisition. So as part of the acquisition management office, and we pulled champions, which we love and call tributes, from each of the major functional departments within Instructure, and they're responsible. Yeah, they're responsible to be the ones that go into the organization, that scope for us what onboarding specifically someone in that department would need. Often there are multiple functions, and so that's why we leave it to them to come back. Then as a board, we look at what are the commonalities, what does everyone who's new to Instructure need to understand, our culture, who we are, who we sell to, our product basics. Even everyone in the company should be conversant in all of our product set. And then we will be, with our anticipation is, with our next acquisition, we will go live with this program. But that's an example where we take enablement and become, I think you used the word glue, across the greater organization.
I love that idea. That's a really great way to pull in different perspectives and also figure out what exactly you need to focus on. And I do agree, in terms of especially product solution training, having different levels has been pretty critical. That also allows you to avoid going too in depth and too into the weeds with sellers that shouldn't be talking about features, functions, right? You can position it a little bit more around use cases and what is impactful to our customers to actually hear about. Anything you'd like to add?
Just one example, our integrations team. Our integrations team wants to do a 1 hour live training with our sellers, and we won't let them do it, because I can't imagine the seller sitting there for an hour hearing about integrations, right? We know where the information is if we need to go find it, but it's, be smart about what you're going to do in the noise and how you can actually reduce that noise so the sellers spend their time selling and helping their customers.
I love that. The one thing I would add is, I think that a lot of companies think of like selling strategies or team selling, or what should people do in their jobs. You also need to have that for what they learn. So there has to be like an actual, when does a rep need to know something? Then who do they partner with? And what have they already gone through that specific detailed training that is just for them? And then when we pass off to the customer success team, what have they learned proactively that, adds on to that experience? And so a lot of what I think helps with some of those barriers is, it's not just the customer journey, it's the sales strategy, it's the selling motion, it's the learning strategy, who knows what and when you need it. And people tend to think of just I want my AE to do this and I want my CS team to do this, and really designing learning programs that map to what people should do and what they shouldn't know in that journey, I think is the one thing I would add.
And I think a lot of us are pointing to this, really acting as an advocate on behalf of our internal customers is really valuable. And to your point, Sheevaun, it's around mindshare and protecting that mindshare, especially for sales reps, which are inundated with so much information, can be really valuable and critical. And that speaks to how we can be more strategic with what we do. And it also is something I want to get your thoughts on, is pushing back is going to be an essential part of our responsibility, right? Especially when it comes to redefining what enablement is. As soon as, Paul, you mentioned this in some of the prep, we don't want to be the land of broken things, right? So we sometimes have to push back and say, no, that's not the right solution. There's a broader ecosystem we need to look at. So any thoughts you guys want to share around that?
One of the ways that, and I did not figure this out until maybe midway through, I was at Vonage, in fact, my last gig before this, is that, we all talk about, I know everybody here would agree that our ultimate goal is to drive revenue. only sellers generate revenue, but enablement teams need to show a reasonable correlation to that revenue improvement. And there's a lot of different ways you can measure that. But a methodology that I learned, I didn't come up with it, came out of Harvard Business School, is called strategy mapping. And the concept of strategy mapping at a high level is you pick no more than 3 financial targets that you're going to focus on. And then as you build your strategy, your program, every element of that has to tie back through the mapping up to at least one of those revenue targets. I'm really oversimplifying this, but if anyone's interested in finding, the book is called The Strategy Focused Organization. It's Harvard Business Press. And it is written for enterprise organizations, but it does scale down very effectively. And the benefit of doing that is now when I'm going into a meeting with, the executives, and it might be sales executives, it may be just executives in the company, I can show them, this is why we're focusing on the things we are. Here's each of the elements, and here's how they're tying back to one of the top line revenue goals that we all agreed we're focused on in 22. And by doing that, it gives us more ability to, as you said, push back, because if there's something we're being asked to do that doesn't align the way that things we say we're going to do in the same way, it's easier for people to see why we wouldn't want to spend time pursuing that activity.
Yeah, we do something very similar, is that everybody wants to help, right? So the fixer of broken things is where that comes from. Hey, I've got this little issue over here. Can you come and fix it? And sometimes it's such a small issue, we think, yeah, I'll get to it, without realizing that even that 1 hour that you spend over here probably going to have an effect of 3 or 4 hours against a project that you should have been working on. And so I have told all of my enablement folks, right, I want you to take risks. I want you to try really wonderful things, as long as there is a measurable outcome, and that outcome aligns with the go-to-market goals of the company. And there's usually only 3 or 4 for the company. And so that, as with Paul, that allows every single person on my team to say, and especially if somebody is coming to them asking for something, they can say, tell me what the outcome is. How does that align with what the corporate goals are? And if it doesn't align, thank you. We'll note it. And when we have time, right, we'll get to it. Right. So it's, it's not a flat no, but what it is it's not on the priority list right now. And by having that, and we meet with our segment leaders and their delegates once a quarter to go over our priorities as well, and say, last quarter, these are the priorities. And it's, near the end of the next particular quarter, are the priorities the same, or should we be adjusting? And so those decisions as well are made together. And so there is a lot of no that can happen. It's the hardest thing for sales enablement people to do, because we are, by our very nature, there to help people, right? We are in service. And when you're in service, you can sometimes forget that you don't have to be in service for all the time, right? Service can be managed. And so I like to say we're in a managed service organization. And that's where the, responsible to, not for comes from.
I love that. I agree both with you, Sheevaun and Paul. But the question that you asked is about pushback, and I feel like I am the queen of no, with reason. And so I think that being able to confidently say no and why, or yes, that's a great idea, not for now, is an art, especially when you work with very strong leaders. And you'll get requests every day. Hey, help me do this. I saw this in the field. This rep said this. We need to train people here. That's all just relative to the person making the request. So my team does a great job of scoping the full request and then coming back with when and if we should even do it. The other part, I think, of being able to push back is like credibility with leaders. Really understanding your audience. Sometimes the leaders will come to you and ask for something, and you might know different. You might know that they're not ready for it, or that's actually not the problem. And so I think pushback is a bit of you have to prove that you know enough about your audience, and then you also have to be able to be confident in what your team can deliver. So might have earned that title, and I hope that's not the worst reputation, but I'm always about no, unless you can talk me into why it would really make an impact to the business. Like, they're just distractions. All those requests are distractions from all the goals that everybody here said. So
yeah, it's really, if you're going to unleash the power of enablement, you have to feel empowered to do what's actually needed. And sometimes that does involve pushing back. And David asked a question that also ties to some of the things we've been talking about. So an example of a measurable outcome, because one of the things that we also need to be mindful of is speaking the language of our stakeholders, and what's important to them needs to be what's important to our team, to be able to have those mutual goals and be more strategic with what we do in our efforts. So Sheevaun, you brought this point up. Do you want to share an example of a metric or outcome?
Yeah. So when we talk about the productivity, right? Productivity is going up, attrition's going down. The attrition numbers, it's pretty clear, right? Are sellers leaving, right? Are we having to ramp more and more sellers? Is the ramp speed going up, going down? All of that. What's, just as a small digression there, what you heard probably 5 years ago, that when a seller left, you were losing about $350,000 worth of business. When a seller leaves an organization now, you're talking millions of dollars that they're walking out of the business with, because your quotas aren't going to change. Customers aren't going to wait for a new seller to ramp up, so they're going to go somewhere, right? And so it's things like that. You've got to watch that attrition very closely. From the productivity perspective, we can all use quota attainment. That's a nice number. I mean, Ring Central hit a 63% quota attainment, which was, wow, quite above industry standard these days. So we had a really good one. But quota attainment can be adjusted based on a model. And so what we like to use instead is from each person that is contributing, regardless of where they are. And even some of my team have contributed revenue directly to Ring Central, right? Which is, we created a revenue stream on our own, which I thought was brilliant. Anyway, so we created some, but is the revenue going up every quarter, right? Because did I sell $10 last quarter and now I sold 12? Yay. Then I sold 14, then I sold 16, right? That makes a difference. And so that's an idea of outcome. Is this program going to turn the dial? And if it's going to turn the dial, is it going to shorten ramp by any measurable amount? Is it going to increase productivity by any measurable amount? Are we going to get more multi-product sales by any measurable amount, right? So what is your anticipated outcome? And if you can't align that, then there's no point in doing the program, because then it's just busy work. And so we are so strapped for resources. I'm sure, Paul and Michelle, and, I can say to you, oh, you've got folks sitting around waiting for something to do, right? They're just waiting there. Yeah, no, none of us do, right? It's all crazy. We used to think that January, February, and March were nice months for us where we could gather everything together and go. They've become the busiest, right? It's like we end one year and then it's like there is no breath. It's like off you go again. So we have to be able to manage that, and you do that through managing the outcomes. I responded online with one where, we manage the number of hours, for example, that sellers have to take training. And whatever it is that they have to do within that set of hours within the quarter. Sometimes that set of hours may be earlier in the quarter. Sometimes it might be later in the quarter. What we aim for is the middle. We do absolutely nothing in the last week of the quarter. We do nothing in the last month of the year, right? This is the agreement. And this is how we get our programs executed, because, again, I said, instead of it being on our calendar, it's on our stakeholders' calendar. And their calendars are on their customers' calendars. And so by having that, tracing back through, you can make sure that everything that you're doing is going to fit within that and meet the outcomes that have been requested. And there's all sorts. I mean, Ring Central has, 200 KPIs or something. There's a crazy number.
David, when I saw your question, I agree with everything that Sheevaun said. And you've got to have those revenue targets you're focused on. The challenge with those is that they are also lagging indicators. And so as important as they are, I interpret your question as, what are some of the things that we should be outcomes we should be looking at that we reasonably believe will drive top line target numbers. And for example, if you roll out a sales methodology and one of your objectives is to have clients or have your sellers be more curious and not going into a feature dive and actually taking time to understand what the prospect's trying to accomplish. Never mind what products, right? We're not ready to prescribe anything yet, trying to understand. And so reasonably, I would expect to see, and I think Sheevaun, you mentioned this, I would expect to see more quotes going out that have cross-product or cross-pollinated, solutions in them. So that's an early indicator we would watch that we reasonably expect to result in more deals closing with multiple products involved. For new hires, a couple of ones that I'm really interested in is time to a full funnel. Each of our organizations has a different definition and analytics on what is a full funnel for a seller to be successful. So how long does it take someone to get to that funnel stage? So those are just a couple of examples of leading indicators that I have found support those large revenue target goals.
And then if I have one that we use, it's really just measuring the knowledge increase on a topic. And so sometimes it's not even about necessarily tying to one of the bigger goals, but they went through this training, we facilitated something, there was e-learning modules, there was an assessment, there's a 20% increase in knowledge against a certain competitor. Those are also, that's an outcome that can drive revenue or more wins later, but the actual metric that I'm looking at and then reporting up might be on the knowledge that we gave them. If that makes sense. So everything they said, plus you can also look at metrics on learning itself.
Yeah, I think the idea of leading and lagging indicators is so critical. It's like inputs versus outputs. That also is critical for coaching and coaching our sales leaders to coach their teams as well. I know with my team, we're juggling a ton, as Sheevaun mentioned. We all have more than enough to do, but we're also trying to identify what are the needs, what are the challenges right now. So as we're building out the team, we're aligning it to the needs of the business as well. And I'm hesitant to dig into this, but I kind of want to get your perspectives on it because it could be a conversation in and of itself, which is around metrics and how they play a role in what we do in terms of being strategic, because it's a really fine line, right? Paul, you mentioned correlation. We don't want to claim causation. We're not directly interacting with those end users or customers. So correlation is the best kind of intention that we can have, right? So one of the things that can be challenging there is having the right data and having the right insights that we can then say, okay, yes, we can actually track that this is having this kind of impact. So I'm curious what your experience with this is. How are you tracking metrics? What are the metrics that you are looking at? And how do you balance that fine line?
Michelle, you want to go first?
Sure. While I'm the queen of no, I'm also the queen of QBR decks that nobody wants to look at. So I, from day one, everywhere I've gone, have been able to say, this is what I think my team should do, how we do it, how much we do. And I go and I shout from the rooftops and go to all of our leaders and share that information. Now, with a go-to-market team, it's not just one metric that we have. Each specific team has their own set of metrics and things that we're looking at. I think that it's important, though, to understand, like when we're looking at our SE enablement, which is going to be very different than what we're doing with maybe our specialists or our overlay teams. Quantity there is not necessarily successful for me, right? And so it's really about the quality, the technical depth that we went into, how proactive we even make our SEs so that they can help the rest of the organization. It's having metrics, but it's also telling the story once you compile them to your leaders. And so it's, I go on a road show. My team knows. I actually just told them their metrics are due for Q1 in a couple days. Mm-hmm. But I go on a road show, and it's not just to say, look at how amazing we are, but it's, we're meeting with the leaders and we're saying, this is what we did. We want to agree on what we're going to do next quarter, and here's the outcome. some of the metrics are driven by us. What we know ties to the programs we deliver. Some of them can be by that specific segment leader or that department leader. Those are things that they want to see. But at the end of the day, you have to track it. And I just made friends. We don't have our own data person. Sheevaun, I'm like very jealous of the number of people you have on your team. So we gotta get scrappy, and we're pulling our own data and we're validating, and we've made friends, and you send a coffee link or you help somebody out next time and they're helping you pull the data that you need to validate the programs that you're running. So that's a lot of kind of how we get the data is either we get it ourselves and we report on it consistently, or we go in the business and ask the data doctors and the data scientists to help us pull what we need.
You would think with the people I have that I would in fact have a dedicated analyst. I do not. So like you, we do the same thing. We beg, borrow, and steal time from our sales ops teams and some of the others. And, we've got a new VP of data analytics. And, she came on board and was inundated with requests from my team right away, right? Hey, we love you. We're fabulous. Can you help us? Right? This kind of thing. So it's the same kind of situation like you're talking about, Michelle, right? We need to be able to show data that the programs are working, not only from the productivity of the amount of content that's being produced and that it's accurate, but that it's working for its right constituents. So when I look at a customer training team, I'm not looking at, this is kind of a weird one because we actually have a revenue arm in there as well. But regardless of the revenue, we look at things as customer sat. What's the NPS, right? How long are they waiting? How many various languages are we being asked for? How are we meeting that demand, right? All of that kind of stuff. If I'm talking about small business, it's a lot more transactional, right? And, when we talk about onboarding, and Paul, like you, we took over the RingCentral corporate onboarding about 1.5 years ago. And it is now, people love it because everybody in the company is getting the whole story. And so it's the same kind of thing, right? We were able to prove through this new onboarding that we put in place for corporate that the knowledge of the company and the retention, right? So the attrition rates had gone down because people felt that they were actually starting in an organization and getting everything that they needed to be comfortable that after their first week or two, they could feel like they were part of the company. Right? As opposed to, hi, welcome to RingCentral. Here's your laptop. Here's where you find your benefits. Do you like the boat? Too bad. And over you go, right? Swim. Hopefully you don't drown, right? So we took a different approach. And that was based on, again, data, because data is what's driving everything right now. And the KPIs, like Michelle said, depending on what part of my team I'm looking at, and depending on what group of stakeholders we're working with, there is a commonality in the kinds of data that we're looking at, but the actual measure of success is going to be different from all of them. And in some cases, some KPIs don't affect others at all. They said customer training is quite different than the innovation training that we're doing for our development teams or that kind of stuff.
Traditionally, I've used their techniques that are very good. For example, what they call balanced scorecarding, which you're taking, you're looking for those leading indicators that I mentioned, and you're figuring out, okay, this quarter, we're going to focus on these, improving these particular metrics. Here's our baseline. Here's our target, and then you're also consistently reviewing, okay, what are we doing next to impact that? Great, finish that. Did it work? Did it not work? Right. So there's ways you can do it. That's just one technique. One of the things that I'm really excited about this year is we now are implementing technology platform that will allow us to tie those specific metrics that we've defined with the sales leaders that we care most about. Because again, you could measure 1,000 things, but those critical measurements, and we're able to actually be able to tie those back to results and metrics in Salesforce. And what gets me so excited about that is it's just going to make it so much easier, number one, to communicate to the rest of the organization, but also for my team and I for planning. We're going to have a better insight into actual, like I say, because it's tied back to actual sales data, rep performance data, and those types of things. So that's another way of measuring.
even hiring data.
Yeah.
Right? How are the teams going to grow? Because that's going to affect our programs, and it's going to affect our support ratios. Things
That's
like
what I
that.
love about acquisition, Sheevaun. You just never know. How many people are coming this time? Is it 3? Is it 30? Is it 300? Right? So.
Yep.
Yeah, I think starting with the metrics with any initiative we launch, for us, we're focusing on sales methodology and building that out. And one of the first things we did was actually identify the qualitative and quantitative metrics we're going to be looking at in terms of, was this actually impactful down the line? So I think that's pretty critical. Also, tapping into any data we can get our hands on. Like I just found out we have some data in Tableau, and I'm all over that. I want to see what we have and how we can dig into that data as well. One thing that I think is interesting too, that touches on like the power of enablement, something you wouldn't necessarily think that enablement would do, that I'm thinking through right now, is where do all our data sources come from? Because that's a conversation maybe we're not having internally. I just found out marketing has their own data platform that they're looking at right now that's not Tableau. So having and facilitating those conversations, I think internally, is one of the ways that we can be strategic and add value to the organization as well. Feel free to jump in with thoughts on that. Otherwise, I thought we could dig into some of our primary stakeholders. I know Sheevaun and Paul, you both mentioned the CRO being your primary stakeholder. Who are the people that we want to engage to build up the strategic nature of what we do?
Actually, in my case, the CRO is one of my stakeholders.
Yeah.
I would say my biggest stakeholder by far is the RingCentral customers, millions of which we have, right? If they're not buying from us, then there's no reason for us to exist. So I have all of my team focused that they may work directly with particular segment leaders, for example, but our ultimate stakeholder are the people that are using our products. And that means that, and that's another reason why I was able to bring this whole team together, because we have a full customer journey end-to-end view in enablement. There is no break, right? It can't be that somebody comes on and then we're going to do our thing and throw them over the fence to you, right? That may happen in other parts of the organization, but it doesn't happen with us anymore. And because of that, we've got a really great view of all of it. And my CX team now is upwards of 70 people. I mean, it's a big team covering the whole customer journey. And because it's the whole customer journey, part of them are actually working with some of the the pre-sales side of the business as well, which is acquisition, right? So it's all of it is together now. And our enablement team has more views into the business than anyone else in the business does. The data also comes from Anaplan. The data also comes from Salesforce and Tableau and SalesHood and HighSpot and anywhere that we are using information in order to create go-to-market methods and how we're going to do this. All of them can be combined in some way or another to give us the information that we need to make the right decisions to go forward and to address the right market, to address the right tools, to all of that. So there isn't any one stakeholder and there isn't any one tool that's doing it. It's multiplications of all of it. It's very complicated, but the fact that, again, we have a team that covers all of it means that we can say, here's our big conglomerate of data. What are we going to do with it? And I wish I had a dedicated person, Michelle, because
I'm so grateful. Our RevOps team has built, they named it One Ring, the One Ring, and it lives in Tableau. And they built it so that teams, sales teams, and my team and I can go in and we can mine a lot of the data that we would want. Just have to know how to run Tableau a little bit, but that's made it really simple in many ways to self-serve. I agree with the concept of customer as stakeholder. When I looked at when I heard you ask the question, my mind, I guess, also went to who do we, yes, maybe the CRO happens to be a primary stakeholder for me, but what other executives or leaders in the organization need to be educated and understand what enablement is doing? And your ability to do this is going to vary by the size of the organization. But I have found that it's also very beneficial to have as many folks as you can on the executive committee understand from a from a strategic level, what is enablement doing, and what are the outcomes that we're driving and the achievements that we've had. I've found that having the for example, one of the finance executives understand what we're doing. Our CFO here happens to be one of the biggest fans of what the team and I are doing, and that's important for a lot of reasons. I get the opportunity to go in front of the full EC in their meetings, occasionally, and again, update them on kind of what Michelle said. Okay, here's what we said we're going to do. Here's how we did it. Here are the results. But think a little, think broadly. At Vonage, I was fortunate enough to have access to a CEO who was also very interested in their enablement. He would come to our sales methodology training sessions sometimes and just sit in or offer his support. And so that was a unique opportunity I had to build that relationship. Alan was very aware of what we're doing. So again, it depends on your situation, but I would think outside of revenue leaders and think of who the other executives are that really should understand what enablement really is.
So I love that. I have two kinds of stakeholders. One that I need to sponsor and help me drive programs, projects, and enablement, and the others that I need to give me things to be successful. And so it's a mix. And I think if we just use stakeholder as kind of the common definition, I have about 12 of them. They're all the leaders of the different groups, and we meet with them quarterly. I always meet with our CRO and give him the full high level of what we're doing across all of his revenue orgs. But then I forced my way into cross-functional stakeholder kind of relationships and awareness. So meeting with your marketing team or your product team or the different groups that you need their help to be successful. So maybe it's not that they're necessarily championing or really like telling you what they need, but they're a key part in just driving revenue. So those are the other people. So I have two. I got to tell you what we did, and I need you to back us up, and then I need you to do something for me. So let's be friends. So I got two of them, two groups.
Let's be friends, for sure. So one thing that comes up with stakeholders too is how we build trust with them, and also how do we get the buy-in that we need. And buy-in can mean various things, and it often leads to us being able to build out our teams and build out our capacity and resources to do all the things that we need to support the organization more broadly. So I'm curious, what are some of the ways that you guys build trust and engage with your stakeholders to increase that buy-in?
Go ahead, Sheevaun.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I think for me, it comes down to execution. So if you want your stakeholders to trust you, they need to have a level of confidence of you as a leader, your ability, your understanding of their business, and then where we need to go. That comes with execution. So that comes with some really ugly grunt work sometimes. And that comes with then the actual relationship that you have and going to them. And every time they reschedule that meeting, you still find time to have that connection with them. So I think that it builds then this muscle that you have with the stakeholders, right? It's gotten to a point where if I don't schedule the quarterly QBR with someone, they're like, are you okay? What, are you on vacation? Like, where are you, right? Or you haven't checked on me, or we haven't spoken. That came over time of just being, making it a priority to build that relationship. It also came with some projects and programs that I might not have wanted or thought were priorities that we just had to knock out to build credibility. So it's a balancing act, I think, but it gets you to a point later where you can say, thank you, stakeholder, for that wonderful request. Mm-hmm. We'll do that later. It also gets you to a point where, hey, stakeholder, if you really want me to do this, I need you to go champion and help me get the headcount and help me tell the story to our executives. So I think it's a lot of execution. It's a lot of really forcing and like standardizing those relationships that'll get you the credibility and it's a lot of work. It's like a marriage. Like I have one I have one husband at home and I have like 14 spouses at work because it takes that much work of daily. You get what you put into it, is what I would say. But don't tell my husband about my spouses at work.
Yeah, I agree, Michelle. Trust follows execution. To me, it's really that. I mean, there's a lot that underlies that, but it's really that simple. Right? People may be willing to take a leap of faith with you when you're new, or they're new to the organization, or sales enablement's new to the organization, whatever that might be. But you need to look for, especially if you're starting off, if you've been tapped as an army of one and you're creating enablement for the first time at your company, pick one or two things that are key to the success of the organization, but that are also quick wins, right? Some projects are going to take multiple quarters to fully realize and execute. You need to have those as well, but always be looking for those short and medium term outcomes that you can show people quickly what you're doing.
Yeah, when it came to Ring Central and I talked about, investors, supply chains, my investor at the time was the CRO. And through investigation really quickly, we discovered there were two things that needed to be fixed right away. One was onboarding. We need to get a really effective onboarding program, new hire training in place. And we needed to get a one-stop shop, essentially a sales portal. And so we had no money. So the sales portal was written in Google Site Builder, right? We just wrote it ourselves. And then the onboarding was just a revamping. Well, it was a revamping. We trashed everything that was there before and redid it. And so it was really thinking about, instead of 2 weeks sitting in a room with subject matter experts turning their back on you and reading their slides, which is what it was, we said we're going to do it 1 week. It's going to be very interactive, but there's going to be pre-work ahead of time. There's going to be work after, all of that. We got those done fairly quickly within the first 6 months of my arrival, right? We had version 1 of each of those, but it was very generic. But then by the end of the year, they were evolved. We had started creating different learning paths based on your roles. All of that was happening. And so at the QBR in January of the following year, I was at the same table with the CRO. Up came, the slides talking about all the work that the team had done and the effect that it had on sales. And he looked at me and went, "You're going to want more money, aren't you?" I think, "Oh yeah, that's how it works, buddy. That's the relationship, right? That's how you get it, is you deliver results, you get more money." That's why I've got 160 people, right? We help deliver results over and over and over again. A lot of the people that we got came from, Michelle, you were talking about it, working with those various segment leaders and saying, "You want to do this new program? I don't have the head count. Give me head count." And they did. So my team has grown this like an amoeba organically by going out and snipping off bits of budget from other areas because we were able to execute and because that trust was built. So, long story, it's the same thing. It's execution and trust is what it comes down to.
Yeah, essentially follow through, and the quality of what you put out is really critical. And that was my experience. Paul, I was actually tapped to build out.
Say what you're going to do,
right?
And do it. Yeah.
Right. Build out enablement at my current organization. Started with a focus on onboarding. That went really well. And that kind of opened up the door to being able to build out the team and do more work as well. And I know we're coming up on time. One of the things that I know we're all really passionate about is tangible action items, something that you can take away. So we'll just go through the group really quick and share one tangible action item that the participants can take away with them. So Paul, why don't you start?
I will go back to what I started with. If you aren't currently, if your enablement program is not currently aligned to 1 to 3 specific revenue achievements or outcomes that are important to your executives, that's the first thing I do. Sit down with them, understand from them what those targets are, have agreement together, and then go and create some mapping. It doesn't even have to be complicated, that you can then go back and say, all right, here's what we agreed are our target or our objectives, and here's what we're putting in place or have in place to do that. That will help you make immediate steps forward to being seen as a business partner as opposed to a training delivery. So
great. Sheevaun, what about you?
Yeah, along that line, it's getting the relationship of responsible to, not for established. to make sure that you do have that, so they understand that if a program fails at the execution level, it's not the fault of the enablement team. It's that it wasn't executed properly. But that's built on the things that Paul's talking about. You got to have that first. But once you have that, then responsible to not for is absolutely apparent, absolutely critical. During my stand and deliver, the VP down in LA said, "Love what you're talking about. What are you going to do if my sellers don't do it?" I said, "I'm not going to do anything. What are you going to do if your sellers don't do it?" And he kind of chuckled, and I said, "I'm serious, because you are going to have that random sales manager who's not going to do it, and you're going to need that leader to come in and go, this isn't optional. You need to get this done." You never want to do that. The moment you become the stick, right? You become the disciplinarian. No longer is it a choice. It becomes a chore. And the moment it becomes a chore, you're done. So you want to continue it being a choice. And that means that execution must be the accountability of the sales leaders.
So
Absolutely. And Michelle, what about you?
I would say if you're not already quarterly at minimum going around and sharing your results with the people that you consider your stakeholders, you should start. And if you need a template or what are those 5-10 slides, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share. But just because we can kind of correlate to revenue doesn't mean that our leaders get what our teams do. And I know we've all said it, we have incredible teams. That's the time you get to highlight the people on your team. That's the time you get to share how we're making an impact. That's the time you get to share the results and that things are working. So do it. It might feel awkward the first time, the second time, and then you'll just get in this cadence. But no one's going to shout from the rooftops, enablement is the reason we hit our number this quarter, unless you're the one dropping that knowledge and putting it in their ear every quarter. So just don't be afraid of it and just do it.
Yeah. And I think one thing that encompasses what we've all kind of touched on is having that charter, being able to speak up about what your team does and doesn't do, and also increasing visibility around your activities and outcomes as well. Roadshows are great, but constantly being able to communicate out what your team is doing is critical. As Jack said, please reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. If there's anything we can do to help, please let us know. And thank you to everyone who participated today, to my co-panelists as well. Please join us on May 27th for the second part of this series, The Importance of Change Management. And with that, I think we're a wrap for today.
Thanks everybody. I enjoyed that, Paul, Michelle. That was fun.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.